Welcome to CoB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvan Raghavan.
So, Sharan, somebody told me about this, and it's a very interesting contrast between two cases, and I want your opinion on it.
Okay.
Two different products in possibly two different geographies. They were women products, but in both these places, it was found that a lot of men had started using it. Yeah. So, before I go any further, let me reveal the products so that I don't lose you in the confusion. So there was Veet, the hair removal cream, and then there was Fair and Lovely, the fairness cream. Now both these, somebody did a category research and they found that a lot of men were using both these products.
Right.
And in both these cases, after the research got known, companies launched same product for men. In one case, which is in Wheat's case, Wheat launched Wheat for men,
Yep.
and the product didn't work
At all.
at all,
Yeah.
despite the research saying that a lot of the consumption is already coming from men.
Right.
On the other hand, Imami saw this insight that 30% of the consumption is coming from men, and
Hmm.
they launched Fair and Handsome,
Right.
and Fair and Handsome worked. It is possibly, even amongst men today, it is the biggest fairness cream, above and beyond, I think, Fair and Lovely Men and Garnier and other players, right?
Hmm.
What do you think is the difference between the two? Why did Fair and Handsome work, and why did Wheat for Men fail?
So there's one side called consumer insights. There are innovations and how you take them into market under different brands. So my guess with wheat is that I'm aware of the wheat story because it's happened with RB in the UK, where they had almost double the volume suddenly coming from wheat, and nobody knew why it was happening. And then research, like you said, revealed that men were consuming a lot of wheat hair removal cream, and it was the age of the metrosexual men. And therefore, they launched the men's wheat for men hair removal. And that just didn't work, probably because the wheat brand name was so feminine and associated with the the woman of the market. And for men to suddenly seem to be picking up wheat while they still wanted to remove a hair, they did not want to be seen buying wheat from a store. And we did not have enough equity to transfer from the female shopper to the male shopper. While the product utility could transcend the genders, the brand itself could not. And that could also possibly be why, despite having access to the same data as Imami, Fair and Lovely never launched the Fair and Lovely for men, because Fair and Lovely, just by the name itself and by the reputation, having been in the market for close to 30 years, they did not see transference of equity from the female to the male user. And because they didn't do that, is why Imami had a pretty almost easy run, I'd say, when they launched Fair and Handsome, and they were able to take it on as a new brand with no baggage from the past years, and encourage men to start buying fairness cream for themselves. And they did build a narrative around it, saying men's skin is different, is harder, it needs better working fairness creams and all that. But I think the difference comes down to transference of equity on both these occasions, and how one brand had to learn it the hard way, and one brand had it easy because the other one was very averse to it.
Okay,
And
and Imami Fair and Handsome.
hmm,
When they launched, they already had Imami Naturally Fair, Natural Fairness Cream,
hmm,
right? So, if they would have gone the same route and said Imami Natural Fairness Cream for men,
hmm.
do you think they would have received the same success?
Probably not. But I don't think even the naturally fair or natural fairness cream was that big a brand in the market at that time. because the only two fairness creams, if I remember, back in 2004, 2005, was Fair and Lovely, and the only challenger being Fair from Kevin Care. These were the two main fairness creams competing, and the rest of the brands were largely also Rans. So they did not, Imami's fairness cream did not merit or did not have the equity to suddenly be leveraged into a different category. So that's possibly why they didn't do it. And I think it made a lot of sense to take the category heads on by just doing the opposite of the existing market leader, Fair and Lovely to Fair and Handsome. As tacky as it sounds, I still think the name is super tacky, but it definitely did its job.
Hmm. Okay. Fair. And therefore, since we are starting the today's episode on this particular note, why don't you pick this up a little bit more and help our listeners understand what are the various nuances here? Maybe if you were handling wheat and you had the benefit of
Hindsight.
this wisdom retrospectively, what would you have done differently?
See, I think the core of it comes down to brand extensions, right? I think people would have figured out by what we're saying that brand extensions is what we're talking about today.
Hmm.
And see, what's happened in the market eventually is what Veet would have done, because there are so many male grooming brands in the market across the world today, and male hair removal brands. So I know even in Shark Tank, there were a couple of male hair removal brands. The categories evolved there. And with the technology, with the product technology that RB had, or rather Veet had at that point,
Hmm.
they could have launched a male equivalent of a brand. And that wasn't something that RB did then. And if you wanted to penetrate into the male segment of the consumers, when you knew the men were consuming greater volumes of the product just by nature of having more hair,
Hmm.
they could have created an entire new category at that point. But yeah, they wanted to leverage existing equity of wheat, and that's where I think it fell flat. So let me take a step back. Let's say, what exactly is a brand extension, right?
Hmm.
So when a business uses the equity of an established brand to introduce a product in another category or subcategory is what is a brand extension. It it is also when the pre-established equity can be milked by transferring the equity that they already have established into the new category they're entering.
Hmm.
And the obvious advantage is that they don't have to start from scratch. They start with something that they've already done before, and people know what the brand stands for, and therefore leverage that brand extension. And yeah, it can go wrong, but that's why people do brand extensions, because they don't have to start from scratch.
Hmm. Okay, understood what is brand extension. Now, Sharon, we were just speaking about Racket and brands of fairly large stature.
Right.
So even with all the resources and wisdom and talent that large companies have at their disposal, why do even the large companies struggle to establish their brand extensions?
Because the large companies are the ones that actually have the baggage of existing equity. The first endeavor is to make sure you're able to leverage the equity that your brands already have in the market.
Hmm.
So, so what do? You want to see if your brand has transferable equity,
Hmm.
and some brands do it very well. Like Apple went from computers to mobile phones to watches to TVs, and people are still waiting for them to launch a car, because
Hmm.
car has now become a tech product.
Hmm.
But and therefore that equity is transferable. There's some equity that isn't transferable, and it takes the business and the brand leaders to understand this. It's not just about data, it's about getting the fabric of what the brand feels.
Hmm.
So we've even spoken, why go as far as Reckitt in the UK? So we had Basha and Narayan on our podcast,
Yeah.
where they've discussed Cadbury Eclair Crunch,
Hmm.
which didn't work because it just did not align with the delayed gratification of Cadbury eclairs.
Hmm.
So something, I mean, I would say Crunch still has delayed gratification, because if you just kept sucking on the candy, I
Hmm.
could still find logical reasons of why it should have worked.
Hmm.
But consumers just didn't think of it like that.
Yeah, having worked on that brand, I can also tell you that it has two parts to it.
Hmm.
One is the chocolate center in the middle, which is the final denouement of having that candy.
Right.
Second is not just delayed gratification, but the entire engaging eat of the caramel.
Hmm.
The way you roll around it and it kind of sticks, then it comes out, etc., etc. So people enjoy that. A caramel, a hard boiled caramel like Alpenlibe or a Crunch, does not offer the same kind of engagement. And I think the
Exactly.
eclair's promise isn't fulfilled by the brand.
Right. And actually, that brings me to the second point of why this can fail is that the way the company perceives a brand's equity is not
Hmm.
necessarily how the consumers perceive the brand's equity.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what they take away from the brand can be very, very different.
Hmm.
And yes, you should do your research. And I'm sure there was research done. But doing your research and actually knowing why consumers are saying what they're saying, slightly different. Yeah, all of us are richer in hindsight.
Hmm.
But even if you have research, it can still go wrong. In a category from eclairs to hard boiled candy, it's just adjacent. It should have worked, but it didn't.
Yeah, I think when we all do research, we know that we are able to go to a certain number of consumers,
Right.
and we take care to make sure that those people are representative of India. But finally, it's his representation, and you're looking at double digit or maybe three digit representation
That's it.
of a country that has 1.4 billion people, and
Hmm.
hence, therefore, research has its limitation, and you don't know. Certainly, for mass adoption products like eclairs, etc., whether your research will adequately scale or not. So I think
True.
that's where crunch lost its crunch.
And the third point is competence.
Hmm.
A lot of brands have the capability to
Hmm.
play in a new category.
Hmm.
The brands also might have the equity to garner the right to win, but the business itself might not have the capability to play in that category. The
Hmm.
business might not be equipped operationally to succeed in a category like that.
Hmm.
So that's when things can go wrong. So the example for this one is Harley Davidson
Hmm.
trying to sell perfumes,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
because the ecosystem and the go-to market for perfumes
Hmm.
is so drastically different
Hmm.
from selling motorcycles. It just did not take off. And who wants to sell like who wants to smell like a motorcyclist anyway?
No, in fact,
Them.
in one of our previous episodes, Sharon, I think when you were speaking about Oreo launch,
Hmm,
one of the things that you mentioned, and possibly even during Tang launch, we would have spoken about this, that when Cadbury as a company got into new categories, they had to learn the category ways of working completely from the scratch.
absolutely. And that's within FMCG food. Imagine
Within
that.
FMCG, within snacking,
Yeah.
yeah, even in an adjacent category, like we said that in chocolates you could sell in a few pieces and you could feel happy. Biscuits you have to sell in by dozens, even to be
Yep.
visible.
Yeah.
Right? This learning took quite some time for for Cadbury to develop. So Harley Davidson and perfume, obviously, you can forgive them for not knowing the space.
Another example that comes to mind is Cosmopolitan magazine
Mm-hmm.
launched a yogurt brand
Okay.
once upon a time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a magazine brand launching yogurt.
Mm.
It's it is completely chaos because they said a lot of women read Cosmopolitan magazines and a lot
Mm.
of the women were going on diets and
Mm.
yogurt was the in thing. And they believed Cosmopolitan triggered certain diet movements and they wanted to trigger the yogurt movement and they launched yogurt. I'm not sure when exactly this happened. I'll probably fish it out for the notes. But they actually launched a yogurt brand, Cosmopolitan magazine. So this is where your competence kind of is very different from your ambition.
Mm. Interesting. Very interesting, actually. I'm also trying to think through if there are successful innovations like these.
Hmm.
And like you're saying, possibly Apple comes to mind to everybody who thinks of something like this, that they've been able to transcend multiple formats of devices, although one can argue that they are largely in the same, you know,
Yeah,
electronics entertainment space, and hence not as drastically different. But yes, we would have to give credit to the company that they've been able to live through their core brand promise across all devices.
right. One brand that kind of did this successfully is
Hmm.
Michelin.
Hmm.
Michelin tires, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And the Michelin star
yeah,
restaurant accreditation. I think it just evolved very differently.
yeah.
So, for people who don't know the story, it was originally given as a travel book for drivers and the truck drivers to know where to stop and what restaurants are good enough when they travel.
Hmm.
That's how they started putting together basically like a travel booklet, is what they started doing.
Hmm.
And that then evolved into restaurant reviewing and became anonymous restaurant reviewing and then became a restaurant accreditation model,
Hmm.
completely different from the tire business that's core to the brand.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
one very, very drastically different brand extension that I can think of, where the competence eventually managed to meet up to the brand aspiration.
Yeah, yeah. Possibly because the brand owners gave it the wings to go
Hmm.
its own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. Hmm. Fair.
And one more reason why companies struggle on brand extension is that they assume equity is transferred already. So, first one is thinking your brand can transfer equity.
Hmm.
The other one is to assume your brand has already transferred the equity.
Hmm.
Because even if you launch a new brand and into a new category, that requires significant communication to drive
Hmm.
awareness, to build it. So you need to build the business. Just because you've slapped on the brand label, you're not going to get ready business. A lot of businesses are, I wouldn't want to go into examples of saying what didn't work, but there are businesses that you and I and anybody can recall where they extend it, but they never really give it its importance.
Hmm.
And then that kind of left to fail. And
Fair.
that's pretty much why a lot of brand extensions actually face headwinds because of these points that are being missed.
Hmm. Okay. And the previous question that I asked you was around why big companies with even their large budgets, etc., are not able to get it right. And there are
Right.
these three, four reasons, etc. And what do you think changes? We've seen a lot of startups, being able to launch products now. They are able to get them right.
Right.
Yeah. A number of products under the same company umbrella. What do you think they do right?
Hmm. So this is a very, what do you say, very boring answer. I go back to the brand ladder or the fab framework that you've spoken of at least twice or thrice on the show already. I wouldn't, for our listeners, we're going to leave a link to the episodes that we've discussed the brand ladder. I think even Basha brought it up in his, when we interviewed him.
Yeah.
So going back to the brand ladder and seeing if the brand actually fits into the new category you're entering is the first step. And I think that's what a lot of brands do right when they get the brand extensions right. And
Mm-hmm.
be it big, small, and this is where they get it right.
Hmm.
If they're going to get the first step is it, and then comes research, understanding consumers, talking to them, and making sure you are seeing the brand like the way consumers see it, and you don't have your marketing myopia of saying this is how my brand can win and force fitting your brand into a new category. And another way I think this is done very well by Oreo is that, again, on the competence issue, is partnerships. When you don't have the capability to win in a certain category, you partner with somebody who already has the wherewithal to win there. So Oreo is partnering with Walls and with McDonald's
Yeah.
for the ice creams.
Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant move. I think even Cadbury had partnered with Unilever or another brand to make the Cadbury ice creams.
Yeah.
So I think that is how partnerships can be built. So imagine Cadbury, which is a chocolate company looking to make ice creams, which is a completely different business with cold chain and complete works of that. Would have never managed to crack it.
Hmm.
But finding these partnerships to play in to license out your brand even to win
Hmm.
in a certain category is how you milk your brand's equity.
Hmm. I think, if I remember it rightly, somewhere in UK, Cadbury had launched ice creams.
No, no, there still are.
They
Cadbury ice
still are.
cream still
Yeah,
exist in the UK. Yeah.
yeah, but didn't become very big though. One of the examples that comes to me when I was still in the marketing team there was this activation called Cadbury Shera Shrushti, where Cadbury had tied up with mithai walas in the east to
Right.
give them a challenge or a contest of making mithai out of Cadbury, such that, and then they would go around tasting and give awards, etc., etc. And the idea was to help Cadbury seep into the sweet culture of East or Kolkata,
Right.
and this was considered a way of doing so. Rather than Cadbury making the mithai, why not hand over the control of the process to the people who own it and let them do it with your brand.
Yeah, and seep into the mix and therefore equate chocolates with mithai.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's exactly how we could do the partnerships,
Hmm,
right?
hmm, hmm. And I think maybe what I'm taking out from this answer of yours is
Mm.
the fact that too often large companies make the mistake of hypothesizing for the consumer and thereby stretching the brand beyond what is possibly fathomable by the consumer. Whereas in the smaller companies, more often than not, they don't lose sight of the fact that their consumer sees the brand only in a certain manner, and hence if they need an innovation, they are possibly more agile, nimble, etc., to launch it under a new name rather than stretching the current brand across it.
Right. And see, it's not like all the small businesses get it right and all the large businesses get it wrong.
Correct.
I think we're just more pandering to the audience who are listening to us by being nice to them. But it's more watch out areas and why things can and cannot work when you're extending your brand in general.
Mm. No,
And
I also think that I am part of such a company, and I've been part of company. Both of us have been part of the company where we know that what can scale bring,
right.
and therefore it is tempting to try and club any of your newer initiatives into one of the scale things, because then if you get it right, it just gives you significant momentum.
Hmm.
Yeah, it just creates an unbeatable force behind you versus launching a new brand amongst a slew of some bigger ones.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm just a little hard pressed to go back to the Oreo example.
Hmm.
In the context of Oreo was a black sandwich cookie,
Hmm.
and I know the launch team fought tooth and nail to have it branded the first time ever in the world as Cadbury Oreo
Hmm.
to justify it as a chocolate cookie.
Hmm.
And I think that went a long way in taking Cadbury's equity in India and into the biscuit category with Oreo. That's something that's a good success in a big company of how the brand was extended.
Hmm. Okay, and let me put you on pedestal and ask you this: what do you think of Bonvita cookies? Bread
See,
extension, yay or nay?
I will still say yeah. I'll tell you
Okay.
why.
Uh,
Because see, a brand's success or failure is more defined by the ambition you set for it. And you know, category which is adjacent, does it have a right to win? Do the other brands play in the same space? There's Horlicks biscuits, there's Boost, and having Bonvita is not wrong at all. The only problem Bonvita faces was that Horlicks base is so big. The equity that they were able to transfer into the biscuit category was greater, and the the base of Bonvita was is far smaller, and therefore the size impact. And yeah, in hindsight, we could have done it differently. We could have gone about it differently, but I would still say yes because I say this with having had backstage access to the creation of the brand. I would definitely say yeah because it definitely has a right to win in the category. But yeah, that's me getting off the pedestal. But the larger point for the smaller brands to keep note is to be very clear about the brand architecture they want to build in the system.
hmm.
This is a brand architecture sounds very complex, but it's fairly simple with examples. So, in theory, there are three different kinds of brand architecture. One is the master brand, where You have one brand in the company which goes around and being the brand for every product the company makes, like Apple, like FedEx, and all these are single brand companies which all the services or products they make are
Mm,
endorsed by are under the same brand. So that's a master brand. Then you have the house of brands, which is most FMCG companies are these house of brands, where you have multiple brands in the ecosystem, and each brand is a business unit by itself, and
mm,
they might extend into even competing categories. But that's where the category development comes into play. And then you have endorsed brands, like we just spoke about Cadbury endorsing Oreo, or
mm,
Cadbury Bonvita, Cadbury Five Star, where the mother brand is taken to endorse the sub brands. So these are the three different kinds of brand architecture that exist. But in reality, none of them really exist in silos.
mm,
There's always a hybrid system. So you have within the same company, you'd have some brands which are the master brands, some would be endorsed brands, some would be your or the completely different brands from the master brand. So you would have all of this in the system anyway. So I know Nestle is an example that comes to mind where Nestle, a lot of the brands are endorsed by Nestle,
mm,
but there are certain premium brands which are not endorsed by Nestle, like
mm,
your After Eight mint chocolate is
mm,
never called a Nestle After Eight because the master brand or the mother brand is considered less premium to be endorsing a premium brand like After Eight,
mm,
where the brand system is even more premium than the mother brand. So those things can also happen. But having clarity of what you're building, how this affects the equity of the mother brand that you have, and being cognizant of your capabilities. Are you partnering? Are you not partnering? Are you competing? And best of all, making sure your category, kind of the category you're entering into, is adjacent to the category you're playing in. These largely are the checkpoints for a brand to keep in mind when they're doing extending their brand, looking to milk it for
mm.
greater returns.
Fair. I think it reminds me also of one of the conversations that we had earlier, uh, when I was talking about one of my assignments where I was supposed to create a counter to Kinder Joy.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you know, we made a choice first to say what brand would we choose to go with.
Hmm.
And we had access to Cadbury Dairy Milk, we had access to, for example, Eclairs, we had access to Bub Balu,
Five star also, right?
5 star, and then we had access to Gems.
Right.
Yeah, so therefore, considering the TG that we were going to, the target segment that we were going to speak to, which was kids and mothers of kids, and what are the core values we wanted to embody our new product with, we decided that it will be Gems. And then we created an extension which is
Hmm.
Gems Surprise, because we introduced a toy and made it a whole offering. And the core reason to do that was we wanted to borrow from Gems core properties of multiplicity, multiple trips to mouth, different colors, playfulness, taste and excitement with kids, etc., etc. So therefore it was a natural fit because you were using actually the Gems product in this one, and hence possibly that extension came naturally. It would have been trickier if we were making a completely new chocolate. Yeah, so if you now look at the Cadbury portfolio, in that sense they have two products now which have ball your toy on one side and chocolate on the other. So there is Gem
Lickables.
Surprise and then there is Cadbury Lickables.
Ah, right.
Now think of it, that Lickables now is a very different product. It's a pasty product with a few chunks of chocolate in it, etc., etc. Now rightfully they've not decided to put it under any of the bigger brands.
Right.
Yeah, so what you remember might possibly say Cadbury Dairy Milk somewhere, but it is Cadbury Lickables.
Right.
Yeah, so that those are possibly examples of how a company like that is thoughtfully thinking about brand extensions and what can it borrow from the parent brand, and therefore what is the kind of call that needs to be made on every innovation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And Is there any other, Sharon, any other consideration? For example, lot of our listeners are people who currently possibly will have one brand or two brands. If you were to give them a final advice on when they are looking for an innovation in their company, yeah, how should they go about, you know, they don't have a brand architecture as of now. They would actually be creating one as they launch something.
Mhm.
So therefore, is there an advice for them as to how to think about creation of a brand architecture, or how to go about creating a branding for a new brand that they're looking at?
I will go back to the brand ladder for this.
Mhm.
I'll explain why. It
Mm,
sounds very simple, but I mean, it is simple, but it's not very easy.
mm,
So there's been this, there was this argument within Reckitt for, I think, what, 3 or 4 years, of what the floor cleaner brand should be called, or the kitchen cleaner brand should be called. Should it
mm.
be Lysol or should it be Dettol?
Okay.
Because there was consumer feedback saying what I put on the floor is not what I will use on my kitchen counter. So Lysol didn't have a chance.
Mm,
Dettol had a lot of anti-germ properties, but it was seen too medicinal and too chemically to sit on the kitchen counter. And both of them would work perfectly fine.
yeah.
And to give you another spin into this is to say your Harpic that you use in your toilet, some formulations of it are good enough to clean your kitchen sink. But obviously, you would not use a toilet cleaner in your kitchen sink, even if
Mm,
it's got the same brand.
mm,
So all of them are cleaners at the end of the day. All of them are from the same company. Now, why does a company like Reckitt look to have three different brands for these three different purposes?
mm.
Because each of the brands ladder are different. For example, your Dettol's brand ladder in India is very different from Dettol's brand ladder in Europe,
Okay.
where it's seen more as a cleaning device.
Mm,
Here it's seen more as an antiseptic product.
mm,
And this cleaning also the antiseptic also extends into personal wash, your soaps. But when Dettol launched Dettol Gold, a more luxurious body wash, it bombed because an antiseptic is not expected to be luxurious.
mm,
So these are the core tenets of the brand. Now, when you're coming up with your second product in the system, it's very likely you come up with your manufacturing optimization. You're kind of able to source it together, you're able to make it together. What you have to see is that at an attribute, at a benefit level, are you going to offer the same benefit?
mm,
If not, you're better off launching a separate brand, but it will be expensive to launch a separate brand.
mm,
But can you launch another product which can go within your system? For example, Mama Earth has done it very well by starting off with baby products. What did the brand ladder, what did the brand core stand for? It said it's safe enough for babies. It's absolutely safe for babies, made safe certified. Now, when it's safe enough for babies, it is safe for anybody else.
mm,
And people who were shopping there were already the mothers. So the first extension was to from baby care was into women's personal care.
mm,
And then they realized personal care products entering a home, unless exclusively created for men, will only enter via the female shopper.
mm,
So they extended that into also males. They didn't create a male range, but if you look, you remember the first communication they made was Shilpa Shetty throwing an uptan at a guy,
mm,
saying, "Go use it." It was said this is also for men. Is the campaign that they went on with.
mm,
So extending from baby care to women's to all gender care is the way they've extended the brand of Mama Earth. I think that's a very beautifully built brand among the startups that exist today. And I go back to saying, check your brand ladder, check what the brand core stands for, then check what consumers think of it. Because the brand core and the ladder is what you think of it. Then do consumers think of it the same way? Then you look at saying, do you have the competence to deliver on the promise of this new brand, new
mm,
product? And then see if the product is even adjacent to yours, your current playing category. And if you have all of this right, doesn't mean you will definitely succeed in the brand extension. there's a fair chance that you can succeed in a brand extension, because you can't start all high without any risk to it. So there will be a risk to it, but this is how you can minimize the risk in extending your brand.
That's a fair warning, Sharan. And good. So by asking this question, I've been able to ask you to summarize as well uh, everything that we have tried to talk about thus far. I would possibly, add couple of more things that I heard you say.
Mhm.
You also spoke about the fact that for a for a large company, it is tempting to sometimes extend your brand into various spaces so that you derive the usual benefits, and hence don't fall into that temptation. Always look back at your brand architecture, the core of your brand, what does it mean to the consumer, etc. And hence, always remember that the brand is subservient to consumer, and the consumer should guide you rather than the other way around, rather than you guiding the consumer, and that is where all of your answers will lie, right?
Right.
And second thing that you spoke about earlier was also about the fact that brands will keep discovering innovative spaces, and all brands should by all means go after these innovative spaces and try and appropriate them. The branding has to be chosen in a manner which allows you to win in that space and possibly allows you to leverage your own strengths. Yeah.
Right.
And hence,
Without diluting your existing brand
without
loyalty.
diluting your existing one. So therefore the wheat example was what Sharon spoke about. Excellent. I think this is an interesting one. I don't think anybody has perfect answers here. All of us have the benefit of hindsight, but yes, we can issue fair share of warnings as well as some amount of instructions that people can follow to possibly not make the same mistakes that some of us have made in the past.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Sharon. We used a lot of examples. I think that is something that we should do. This was good fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sudeep.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's CoBBcast.net.